Thank you. Thanks, Matt. Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's a great venue we have here, and thanks to Yankee for putting it on. Very good. It's always nice to come to this event where we can share best practices and talk about our challenges, our collective opportunities. So thanks for that. So I'm going to talk about what supply chain has done at South Coast over the last number of years. But before I do, I'd like to just give you a little backdrop about me. So I came from the high-tech industry. I used to work for EMC Dell, completely different than healthcare. Before that, I was in the medical device manufacturing industry with Smith & Nephew, and then the defense industry with Northrop Grumman. So I've been to a few different industries, all in either operations or supply chain. When I came to healthcare, I was exposed to some things that I had never seen before relative to supply chain. My first week, I asked my team, so where do we get our demand plan? They were like, what's that? So we started from that. We would place orders, and it was a fill, and if I don't have it, just kill the order. Never heard that before. Canceled POs if material wasn't available. I'm used to schedule and delivery, when am I going to get it. Allocation, all of a sudden, allocation. Couldn't get, suppliers wouldn't take new customers. We were using JIT in healthcare. Now I'm a lean person, but when I think about the context of healthcare, right? So, and then we would look at things post close rather than during the operation. Then I was exposed to Puerto Rico, hurricane in Puerto Rico, months after I started, rolled into a year or so of the pandemic. So it's been a learning experience, as well as at the same time trying to develop a new supply chain model here at South Coast. And so one of the things I did before I came to South Coast, I took a week off and I processed, like, okay, I'm going from this industry into this industry. How am I going to make decisions? So what's the high level thinking about the decisions? And so my slides are visuals to stimulate the environment with the words coming from the deck here. So when I first arrived at South Coast, we got together as a team. We said, how are we going to make decisions about what we do here? So the first thing we want to talk about is the patient. For me, I was coming back to a city. I was born at St. Luke's. So I was actually born in the hospital that I'm now servicing as supply chain. So for me, what we do and what you all do, so this is nothing new for anyone in this room, is we think about the patient first, right? That's our job, that's our mission. And then, of course, in order to service the patient, we need to have a viable health system. So the system is next, financial viability of our system. And then the team-based approach is something we all do. And then the individual. So when I meet with people, what I like to tell them is, that's the way I process what you're telling me. Whatever you're telling me, I'm thinking first, how does this affect the patient, then the system, and so on. And if we disagree, usually on reflection, you'll realize that maybe you were thinking of the team first, or the system first, and I'm looking at how's this going to help the patient. So we started this kind of approach when we make our decisions, and it's, when you talk about folks at South Coast, and I'm sure the systems here, we're from the community. I mean, South Coast is one of the largest, if not the largest employer in the area, and so imagine the patient in the room. Imagine the patient is one of your loved ones. So that's how we kind of process our thinking. And so just to start with, right, that was the context of one of the first things that we did towards our change in approach. Not that it wasn't there, but it's just one of those things that we put in place as a strategy. When I interviewed for the position, Dr. Miller, who is no longer with South Coast, who was the chief, the physician in charge, right, the chief medical officer, he asked me, so how are you going to get a doctor to change products? And I said, well, the first thing I'm not going to do is pretend to be a doctor, right? And the second thing I don't want to do is be the cost person. I don't want to be stamped with the cost. I'm the cost person. And so what I said to Dr. Miller was, I think what I would do is start the conversation with the patient. Because now we're both going to agree, how can we help the patient? And once, so my message to my team as we've changed, not again, I'm not disparaging what was there before I got there, but we strive to not be the cost people. So we lead with the clinical outcome of the patient and how is this product or service going to help that length of stay. So join the clinician to help the patient. Cost savings will follow through that unity, is what we've, and all of you, I'm sure, discovered. It's very powerful when the clinical team and you in supply chain are on the same page. And for the suppliers in the room, we need to, as stewards of fiduciaries of the system, we want to make sure that we're aligned so that we're not talking to South Coast people about why we should buy something or shouldn't buy something, that together we're going out to the supply chain. And so one of the things that we've instilled is our group in supply chain is a horizontal organization. So we have clinical experts. We have subject matter experts that know their business. I never try to be that person. We want to be a horizontal organization to add value, right? And so we want to bring value to the clinical people, sometimes by being the heavy in the conversation with a supplier, so that the relationship can be preserved for folks. We have to bring the tough message so that the relationship in the clinical silo can be preserved between that supplier and our team. So it's important for us to make sure that we play as much of a role as we can in a couple different ways. And one of the ways that we stress a lot at South Coast is, really know your contracts and maximize their value to the clinical team. So when we're in conversations, we have two discussions going on sometimes. We're trying to make a capital purchase, but we also have a P&L to look out for. So some of the things that we drive in that conversation is to get as much value out. So everything in your contract, if you're a supplier, how many folks here are suppliers? Right, so everything in your contract terms adds value, including the price. So when you come to talk at South Coast, we're looking to see how much value we can extract from that opportunity that's on the table. It could be training, it could be warranty, it could be further price concessions, disposable concessions. So we're looking to get as much value as we can in that horizontal kind of role. And one of the other things that we've noticed is cost savings are very important. When you think about the outcome to the patient, there's other higher level things like length of stay. That's a big cost initiative. So how can this product or service reduce length of stay? How can we collaborate we were just talking about some things earlier, to help reduce infections and hold you accountable that those things don't happen. So that if the contract says that we're going to reduce the infection level, right, we want to make sure we have good measures so we can hold accountability. So that's value that we can get out of the contract. So we bring that to the clinical team as an expertise. So we're not trying to be in their silo. I'm not going to advise you on the best CT to buy. I'm not going to tell you what the best product is that you want. We want to extract value by leveraging our expertise in knowing the contract and understanding it and getting value out of it in that way. Another thing that we do in this space with the clinical folks is, what we've seen is we just came through a year of working with Premier and Yankee to save significant dollars by going through the Ascend program. So thank you, suppliers, that are part of the program, and thank you, Lee, I think you're here, and the folks at Yankee for the work that you did to help us get through that. And Karen, I think, is here as well, and all the people from South Coast. It was a lift, right? So what we told, just to sidebar, sorry, it's not about this, but what I said is, we're mountain climbers, but we're done climbing mountains for a little bit. So Ascend was a nice climb. But what we've seen in the data, and this is when we work with Yankee as well as data that we get internally, is directionally it looks like our data set right now is saying that utilization is a big opportunity. And the cool thing about utilization, which is focus on utilization for us, is always keep that top of mind, because if we can work and share both through the RICs that Yankee has as well as our own team and looking at data, instead of using 4, can we use 3? That's a 25% cost reduction using the stuff you like. So focusing on utilization, turning that into process improvements to flow that patient through our system in a loving way so that they exit both with a great experience at our length of stay goals, as well as saving money by just not having them there longer than they want to be there anyways. So there's ways that we can work to help save cost in the utilization space versus constant product conversions. They're good. They need to be strategic because they're very disruptive. So we want that supplier, and we have a few at South Coast, that comes to us with proactive cost savings that they've realized because their operation had benefit in their production facilities or whatever. So we really respect those suppliers, and there's a little stickiness when you're in that camp. So we do that at South Coast quite a bit, and we've got a couple of stories where we've had proactive cost reductions we didn't know, and or advice to maybe buy through a shortage. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in another slide. Got my notes all over this thing, so thank you, Casey, for the podium, because otherwise it'd just be like, so that's that. So we want our systems to be interoperable, right? That's important. We've worked a lot, and Angela McDonald is here, who's been doing tremendous work at South Coast to help our systems talk to our systems. And it's really important. So we want to enable ease of use with our systems. We want to make sure the clinical jobs at the bedside are so important and so difficult for nurses and staff. We don't want them thinking about where their next supply is coming from. So we want all of our systems to be interoperable. We've got some examples of that at South Coast. We were talking with a few folks just today, but one of the things that I discovered recently is the lack of a uniform barcode. It's really hurting our industry because everybody, if you're a nurse or know of a nurse and they're trying to document, when you go, if I go to Stop and Shop to buy food, everything I hit with the barcode just comes up with the price and everything. But in healthcare, there's movements to try to go to some standards, but the government hasn't imposed one. So you get sometimes multiple barcodes on stuff. We're trying to make sure that we drive interoperability through maybe our contract requirements to specify a specific type of barcode. We're moving towards G10 right now with the operations folks to try to enable ease of use in the OR. But we see there's more work that can be done in that area. That's our current approach, is G10. But interoperability is key. So when we look at a system, we try to build on our strategic platforms because they're already connected, right? And we want to make sure that everything that we do talks to everything else, right? This is a slide here. Just give me a second here. I was outside, and thank you, Dave Texera. I was outside at the patio, and all these papers just started to fly. And Dave Texera is our director of sourcing. He grabbed them. And funny, because Dax was saying, so how long is the session going to be? Because I think he's looking for another cocktail maybe. And and so I said, well, if Dave didn't catch the slides, it would have been real quick, because without them, I got a lot of thoughts, but I'm not that good at memorization. So interoperability is key. So when we look at our systems, so as a vendor, try to build off the stuff we have. So we want to make sure all of our systems talk to our systems and try to get as interoperable as possible. So this one here is an interesting visual, and it's about predictability. So we want to be predictive to the clinical world. And what does that mean? So when you look at what we've done, we have a lot of data, and I think Stephen Grubbs mentioned it this morning, or Larry, about all the data that we have in the system. So we do have a lot of data. At South Coast, with our analytics team, which is led by Angela McDonald, what we're doing is we're turning the data into actionable knowledge. Because data is nothing until you ask it, try to get it to talk to you. It just sits there, and it's like a golf course waiting for you to play, but it's not going to tell you how to play, and so you have to figure it out. But data can be turned into knowledge, and when it's turned into actionable knowledge, especially supply chain data, it's very powerful. So going back to that demand planning comment I made earlier, we have a demand planning kind of operation under Angela, which receives purchasing data, receipts and issues, and tries to profile that and turn that into knowledge so that we can have actionable knowledge there. We compare and contrast the data, and most recently Trista is here, who is working with Power BI to connect some of those dots between usage, demand. So when you look at backlog, for instance, if you're a buyer, or folks, buyers, they have all this stuff on backlog. We went to a backlog model. We moved away from fill or kill. We went to raw fill rate, and we went to a backlog model. And so when we place an order now, if our Cardinal is here, and we talked a lot with them about moving to this model, but when we place an order, if they don't have the order, it goes to backlog. It doesn't get killed. From our team's point of view, they get a little very disappointed when they scan something every day and it gets killed. So what happened was, the behavior is, why would I scan it? I know it's going to get killed. So then they stop scanning it. So then you lose track of the fact that you needed it, and then you run out. So we went to true backlog model, which is if we scan it, the order's placed. If you don't have it, it goes to backlog, and it stays there until it's cleared. That's an important thing. And then the raw fill rate is important for us, because raw fill rate reflects my customer, the staff. So fill or kill, 99% all the time, right? 99%, 99%. It's not our fault. We didn't have it. Supplied it. Doesn't matter. That's not the pain of the staff. So raw fill rate, which we moved to at South Coast, reflects the pain of the staff. If we're at a 95% fill rate, which we saw when we did some of the conversions, or 90, even less, right? I think we were at 89 at one point. The staff was struggling. Our metric was terrible. So we use raw fill rate so we get connectivity to our customer. And we use a backlog model to let our supply chain know that we asked for this last week. I'm not going to ask for it again every day until you have it. When you have it, fill the order. The cool thing about that, which I probably shouldn't tell you, but I'm going to, because you probably know it anyways, is that when you're in a regular backlog model in any kind of a system, a supply chain system, once that receipt comes in, and how many times has this happened to you where the salesperson says, place your order today, the stuff just came in, you placed it, you didn't get it. What happened? Oh, it got consumed, it went somewhere else, right? Because you didn't get it into the system, into the queue. With a backlog model, as soon as that material gets relieved, most times it gets allocated against backlog. We don't have to even go for it again, it just comes off. The thing we're managing now is trying to manage like how much gets allocated, because we had a bunch of stuff on backlog for good reason. All of a sudden it all came in, and we had all these pallets coming in because we had to actually structure how we were going to receive it because it was part of our transition. So backlog is important, as well as fill rate, and then predictability around the demand planning and turning that data into knowledge is really important, and we moved to that just recently. And so then with the Power BI now, just to touch on that a little bit, what Trista is doing, and they're going to be probably too polite to correct me, so if I'm wrong, just give me a look or whatever. But what Trista is doing is taking the consumption rate against the on-hand inventory against the backlog, because if you're a buyer, and I'm not saying everybody's in this space, but at South Coast, you would just look at age backlog, right? So if it's oldest order, I must need it first. Not necessarily true, depending on your burn rate. So what we're doing with Power BI is we're connecting all those dots so we can prioritize the backlog. It might be something that was just placed yesterday, but I only have 3 days on hand at current burn rate. So I need to work that right away. Where I might have something that was placed 5 weeks ago, and I have a bunch. I'm going to last for a month. So we're kind of integrating those systems to get true. What do we need to do to service our customer, the client? We think of it in concentric circles. So when I first got there, and I don't see Karen. Is Karen Lesperance here? I think she might have left. But I don't. Karen was. She's a registered nurse, and so whenever I come across a nurse, what I say to them, we have badges at South Coast, and if you're a registered nurse or a doctor, it says RN or MD, right? So whenever I'm in a meeting, I would say to somebody like Karen, I don't have a magic badge. I consider anybody that's taking care of people as the core, right, of what we are and what we do. So they have magic, in my mind, it's a magic badge, right? So you can take care of, I can't take care of people, so I have to take care of you. So we have these concentric circles starting with the patient, going to the clinical folks, then the technicians, and then we're in that loop, right? So our job is to take care of the clinical people, but by doing so, we want to reflect their pain in our metrics. So if they're not getting supplies, raw fill rate, and the backlog model has served us well to know what we need to get. So Trista is still working that equation, doing a great job, but it's got a lot of fruit, because when you look at the backlog, it can be significant. You know, we have thousands of SKUs that automatically get ordered, go to backlog. Some companies work on a backlog model, so it automatically goes to backlog. And our purchasing folks, the interesting thing that we had the aha moment, and I'm sure that you all have seen this as well, is that we are the first to know that we can't get it because we're in purchasing. But yet, we invariably needed the operations people, clinical people, to tell us they were out. So it's like, well, we know because the system ordered it, it went to backlog, so we knew we didn't get it, we're using raw backlog, but yet we need the nurse to tell us they're out. How can we solve that, right? Because it became, nurses now and staff feeling we got to tell supply chain we need that, when really we had the data. And so the work that we're doing is to take all that data and try to relate it so that we know when that staff member is going to run out, which one first. Because it's on our list somewhere, we just had to prioritize it. So Power BI has some benefits there, and I know there's been some conversations about AI as well. We haven't spent a lot of time in there, but I thought it was great this morning to think about, I think it was Steve Grubbs who said, have your AI committee, because it's coming our way. And of course, you can't meet a salesperson today without them using AI in the first or second sentence. It's just the thing, right? But when you look at it, how does it really add value to our patients, to our length of stay? We haven't really delved into that yet. We're doing this work with Power BI right now, and eventually we'll probably get some. I see some real good opportunities where AI can help us out with some of the repetitive tasks that we do. I'm looking forward to learning more about it. The other thing that kind of ties, and this is a cool slide, that's Wonder Woman, yep, that's who it is. So the other thing that we want to be at South Coast, and I've made this commitment to the board, is invisible, right? We don't want to be disrespected, but we don't want to be visible. We want to be invisible. When you plug your laptop into the power, you don't care where this power is being generated, whether it's a windmill or it's a nuke plant or it's coal fire, whatever it is, right? You just know somebody's doing all that, right? And I know when I plug it in, and once in a great while when there's a hurricane or something like that, you might run out and start thinking about it. But we want to be invisible. We want people to go to wherever they go, get their supplies, not worry about where they come from, although everybody got a crash course during the pandemic, about where our stuff comes from, rolls of paper towels and things like that. And of course, in supply chain in that space, for those of us that went through it, it was quite the experience. But it really showed two things: how fragile our system is in just the world, global kind of logistics. And I think what we all learned, at least at South Coast, we learned during the hurricane in Puerto Rico and the pandemic, and now the hurricane that we just had a few weeks ago, followed by the Helene hurricane, and then there was another hurricane. I think, was it B. Braun's facility? I don't know if it was in one, and unfortunately Baxter was in the middle of the other one. But what we learned is that, this low inventory, constant replenishment model is very fragile, and it can get kind of scary when you start to unpack it and realize that there's not a lot of supply out there, right? And so we'll talk a little bit more about that, but being invisible is important. We don't want our staff to worry about where the supplies are coming from. We want to provide that as a service. They do things with the Magic Badge that we can't do, so let's have them go off and do that. So that's pretty important for us. So invisibility is one of our strategies. So when things get tough and we get called, ideally we got ahead of it. We bought through the nitrile shortage with exam gloves. We learned from the event in Puerto Rico and stocked up fluids for that. We built a warehouse in August of 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic, so that we could then start to stockpile PPE, and then we converted that into strategic reserve. So we have a warehouse now that is more of a strategic reserve where we have IV start kits and saline, things like that. Thinking about, the community relies on us in the worst moment, right? I mean, you've got first responders and then the hospital, right? We're the first, if you go to the FEMA training, the local hospital is the first in the mass casualty and the last out. And they count on us, and they count on us to be open every day, all the time. They don't even think that we won't be able to take care of them. We need to maintain that, right? Because it's important. And when there's a blizzard, we've got, get the sleeping arrangements for folks, and when there's a hurricane, they're just expecting us to be there, so it's important. But we want to be invisible. We don't want to have people talking about us because then they're not doing what they were called to do, which is to take care of patients, right? So another thing that we do at South Coast a lot is we challenge technology, and we try to be innovative. And so we're trying to drive more automation to maintain that invisibility. We're looking at various replenishment systems. We've got something that I believe Children's is using, which is a smart bin, weigh scale, so that the nurse or clinician just takes whatever they need, and our team doesn't even have to scan it. It just orders. We're piloting that. We're looking at some technology to do a Kanban in our bins, so a two-bin system with you don't have to scan it. Just put the bin on top and it'll reorder. We're trying to take and integrate the automation. I think I might have mentioned that now we're looking at Epic as a source of. So when you look at our demand line, and we were talking about this with the Blue Point folks just earlier today, when you look at our demand line, it's really a purchased item that you're seeing, but you don't know if we used it, right? Somebody could have just bought a bunch because they wanted to fill something, and we might see that as demand when it's really just stocking, right? Setting up. It's not true consumption. It's not true consumption. So we're using now Epic data, de-identified Epic data, to know what's consumed at the bedside. And so we're integrating that into our demand planning process. So now we know what we want to purchase, but when you start to right size the facility, there's a couple things you need to be sensitive to, and you all know this. One is that the emergency department may buy something that they absolutely never use, throw away, because if they don't have it in their space for when they need it, somebody could die or be severely impaired. So they buy stuff so you can't use, if you haven't purchased it in 18 months, deactivate it because they need it. They absolutely are going to throw it away. They hope they never use it because it's some life-saving device, but shelf life, throw it away. So it's important to know that in your demand planning that you do have those kinds of things. But what we wanted to do is look at how do we right size if we don't know true consumption. So we want to have true consumption and buffer stock, and strategic reserve, and that's our path that we're on to get our supply right. We don't want to take the true consumption to reduce. We're just changing the model. So one of the things that we're doing is we're taking and trying to make the PARs more visible, because financially, you know that the PAR is expensed, it's assumed, it's consumed. You don't know if it's out there or if it's not out there. We want to make that more visible. We actually also encourage, and Dax and I were talking about this, I think it was yesterday, you can't wait to go tell. We actually encourage the staff to give us back the expired stuff, and we'll credit their department. If you have expired goods at South Coast, you give it back to materials, we give you a budgetary credit, right? We're going to scrap it. You get a budgetary credit, but scrap and expense, it's an expense, right? And it's better than having the staff take it and put it in the med room, right? And then all of a sudden we get joint commission finding because they put it in the red room because it's expired, or take it and put it in the garbage because it's expired. We want to know that we bought it and it was expired. There's valid reasons for that, but we can't track it if we don't bring it back. So we actually bring it back, but we also expense it through a scrap kind of reserve, so we can see the real numbers, right? It's important for us to see the real numbers. And one of the other things in innovation is to understand the box, right? So I was at ARM just a few weeks ago, and there was a speaker there who talked about designing in the box. So you always hear about outside the box thinking. Outside the box thinking can be so grandiose that you can't achieve it. But if you know the box, you know the real box, not the box that somebody's created for you, but the real box, the regulatory box, the financial box, right? Innovate inside the box so that it can be achievable. Because you can spend a lot of time talking about outside the box, but you just talk about it, right? We like to solve things and move on, so we define the box, right? Where can we go? How can we do? That way everything doesn't need grandiose spend, which we, as we all know, can't afford. So that was a pretty good speech down there. And I did talk about the smart technology and the Kanban bins in innovation. So we want to be integrated into everything that happens. We want to make sure that supply chain is aware of things that are going on so that we're integrated together. So integrated means to us that we're integrated with the clinical folks. We want to be integrated with distribution. We want to be integrated with suppliers. We want to be in the data feeds. We want to be in the conversations. We want to get real data versus, don't take this the wrong way, right? Sales data. Because I was in operations and dealt with a lot of salespeople at EMC Dell, and your own folks don't give you sometimes, exactly what's happening in the factory. And so it's always good when you're integrated as far up the supply chain as you can get, because that's the real data that you want to see. And I think, Eric, you mentioned this yesterday on the panel about too many sales folks, not enough operational stuff. And that was a great point, because I just want to see the supply line, and I want to look at when are we going to get the next kit. We don't want to build without our custom packs. We don't want to run to something tomorrow. Can you use something different? We want to have a conversation with our clinical people as far away from the shortage as possible, so that we can socialize it. They can. I realized in healthcare that decisions come slow, but for a reason. The mindset of folks in our industry always comes back to, if I do the wrong thing, somebody could get severely hurt. It's pervasive, right? So our decision making intentionally is kind of slow. So if we can I was inspired within the first few months that I was in healthcare, because for me, we couldn't get saline from the Puerto Rico, and no disrespect to Baxter, I think you guys did a great job if you're here, but we couldn't get the saline, and for me, I was just coming from a publicly traded company, for-profit, publicly traded, report every 3 months. If you don't get the supplies, you don't make the revenue, your stock. So all the clinical staff said was just let us know what you can get. And then you started seeing people using Gatorade, clinical people. They're amazing. You're amazing. Clinical folks, you're amazing people, right? You just go, what do we have to work with? Excuse me, what do we have to work with? Tell me, I know what the body needs. What do you got? Okay, I'm going to use Gatorade. I remember one day we couldn't get sterile water, and one of us they just went to Walmart and bought it. They're like, it's the same thing, right? So they're using it right out of the thing. But so we want to make sure that we're integrated with those conversations. And one of the things, like I said, we want to rationalize our distribution channel. So we spend a lot of time talking about our distribution channel. We want to dual source and self-distribute. We do these things when it makes sense. We want to use our balance sheet for good. So our strategic reserve, some of the buffer stuff that we purchase, we rotate it, but we're using our balance sheet, right, for good. We're not trying to take down the balance sheet, and we're all certainly not trying to overspend it, but we use it for good. Like I said, we bought through the nitrile shortage. We never had an exam glove shortage. We ended up with about 4 to 6 weeks of fluids after the Puerto Rico hurricane. We built that warehouse I spoke of in August during the pandemic with Claflin. I think, Billy, you're here. With Claflin's help, thank you so much for putting that together. They put it together for us in about 2 weeks. They just came in and erected that thing. It was crazy. It's full, has been. We've got the blood collection, tubes, PPE. I mean, Dave Texera is a sourcing genius when it comes to those things, to keep that up. I think he enjoys it too much, but he's really good at it. And so what we want is the supply issues, and I know we all do, to try to impact our inventory levels. I think it's important for us to deal with the supply issues over here so that they're not impacting the staff. And so whenever we get a sense that something would be very impactful to our patients and our staff, we're going to buffer that at some level, because it's important for us to have the conversation thoughtfully for the substitute or what the option would be. And integration with all of our teams and partners is important. Let's see this one here. So you'll see tomorrow more about this. Nicole Rose is here, who put together the entire track there for tomorrow. So thank you, Nicole, for all your work, as well as a member of our team. And you'll see one of the jobs. She's got a few, as we all do. We all have many hats. Everyone in the room has many hats. But what we want to make sure is that we source responsibly. So we're not going to pay a premium to be responsible because it's not required. And you'll hear more about this tomorrow, but we need to look at the math. We need to look at the impact of what we're buying, both on the patients, on the system, and on the environment. But we're not going to pay a premium because when you think about it, and when there was a rebate for an electric vehicle, all of a sudden electric vehicles were more expensive. Not because they cost more, but there was a rebate out there. Hey, it's coming free to you from the government. Why don't I just take it off your hands? So we're not going to pay a premium. We're going to challenge our supply chain to innovate, as America has done since the beginning, our way to a sustainable future. So we will work with local companies, diversity companies. We do two things. One, we buy from them at a competitive price. We'll mentor the local companies. I remember going back a few years, we had a company that lost this big bid, and it was important. It was a company that had been supplying South Coast for a while, and so I couldn't tell them what the other person had for a bid, but they did lose it. And so I went down. I sat down with the owner and his daughter, who was the new owner, and I asked them. I said, "I'm just curious. How many engineers do you have designing?" And I don't want to get into the company or the product, but how many engineers do you have kind of, here to do this work that you're doing for us? "Oh, there's 2. I said, "Well," I think you might want to look at how you cost out your engineering, because looking at this math, you must have 5 or 6. So you might be treating each bid as some kind of a routine number when really you should be looking at more bids reduce your engineering costs, and you should be allocating against where you want to be for volume, and that'll help you get the volume. And so on the next bid, they were more aggressive. They actually won the next bid. But it was like, we try to coach them, right? I had our CEO going back before COVID, asked his woman-owned company, asked me to mentor her through the process of becoming a supplier to a healthcare system. So we did that, and she's a supplier of ours now, as well as there's a lot of suppliers that we use. We're also doing a lot of work, as I don't want to steal any thunder from tomorrow, but we're doing a lot of work with sustainability. It's a passion. It's my new passion is sustainability. I've gone through this a few times. I get excited by these things, but you can see when you're at my age and you're hoping maybe for grandkids or whatever, you're like, what are we going to leave behind? And you'll see a lot about that tomorrow, because it's important for us to have a sustainable future for this spaceship that we're on, because it is finite, and we can be great stewards of it, and America has been a great steward of the country, but we don't have to pay a premium for it, because in America, the way we do things is we innovate, right? We use technology. Some college student right now is going to come up with a great product or service, and somebody will be disruptive that'll come up with a product that'll break through. So we're going to keep demanding. We cannot spend our resources one-dimensionally ever, right? So it would be nice, but we can't. So we're going to keep driving this ethical, social responsible sourcing with eyes wide open, right? So we're not going to pay a premium. We want to know. We want to know the cost, the entire cost of what we do, not just the price that we pay, right? So I have this saying, maybe you've heard it, and I apologize if you've heard it before, but for me, cost is the absence of value. So we need to look at the value that these products bring to both us, to our community, to our environment, and then see where the cost really is. Because you can't just use the price. It's got to be the total cost, because we're going to get, as we'll talk about, there are fees coming, and the government has its way to influence us. We can get ahead of it or not, but we're gonna maintain a social responsible profile at South Coast with an eye towards. I mean, I work for the CFO, so supply chain is in that space, and it's important for us to, like I said, that second thing is system viability. So we have to be responsible, and this is kind of the visual for that. Thank you, Nicole, for this. This is a great slide. This one's probably right after Wonder Woman. I think that's my second kind of best favorite slide. But we want to be socially responsible and keep our eye on our mission, right? We've done some things, and you'll see tomorrow on how to connect that tissue together. And it's going to be a great day tomorrow. If you can attend, it'll be really cool. So we'll talk about that. And this here is net neutral, right? So we're on a path to net neutrality. It's going to be a road to get there, as we all know. Most of our systems are pretty old. Most of our healthcare is pretty old. But 80%, and I know this morning a different number was quoted, but our math says that about 83%, I think it's 83% of our emissions we control with our dollar, right? So we're controlling, for the folks that raise their hands, right, we're controlling your scope 1 and scope 2 through our decision to buy from you. So there's going to be more work, I'm sure, both with the Premier Group and the Yankee Group to have that conversation further so that we can maintain our net neutrality, as well as making sure we do our main mission, which is to take care of people. I probably should have got I don't have a big clock. I don't know where I'm at. So What is it supposed to be, 4:30? All right. Definitely don't want to keep anybody later, and I know Dax has got that in my head about 15 minutes, so we blew by that one, buddy. But it's important, right, for us to maintain this net neutrality, and I just got a thought on that real quick here. Let me just say, yeah, good. So this last one is a pretty important one, and then we'll talk a little bit about the structure. I have the org structure, Eric, so you'll take a look at it. I know you were asking me for it. I didn't send it to you, sorry, but we'll get through it here. It's kind of a cool slide too, but it's transparent. So we want to be as transparent as possible in supply chain. One of the things we do as a service to operations is we share daily actual spend by department, by SKU. So every day, I think, Bobby, I don't know if you get it yet, but I know, Dax, you get it, and others, department leads. Every day, our team sends out what was received to expense or issued to expense the day before. So if you're in cardiovascular, or if you're in the EP cath lab and you know you did a TAVR and you look for the spend, you see 3 TAVRs, you go, oh, hold on, I only did 2 this week or 1. So we do daily spend. And the reason for that is the clinical leads, we used to just review with them after the close. Hey, you know, we closed and you were over by whatever, to budget. And so then we'd get into a rock fetch on what happened, and well, geez, yeah, so-and-so, yeah, I don't know why that came in, and so on and so forth. Somebody bought a big expense and, you know, it should have been put to inventory or whatever, right? Today, what we do is we give folks like Dax daily reporting that his team then analyzes against what they expected. And we also now relate it to budget. So we'll let you know every day where you are to the budget that you signed up for, so that you can proactively say, oh, that's not mine. I don't know why this got put in here. That should have been going to so-and-so's department, or that was supposed to be received into inventory. I don't know, somebody somehow bought it to expense. Let's fix that. So now my first job was in production, and just a quick kind of story. I was in my 20s and I'm in production, and we had standards. I was working for the Defense Department. We had standard cost system, and I would get, monthly, I would get my efficiencies against expectation, and it was like, so anxious, right? What are my numbers going to be? And it was like I said, a high volume. We were making gyroscopes for the defense industry, and I knew that I built so many gyros. I knew what my labor was. I knew what my efficiency should be, and it wasn't that. It was something else. And I went, oh my God, and my boss, oh, what's going on? And so I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I know I built it, and so on and so forth. Then I realized there was one guy, Dave was his name, not this Dave, but another Dave, Dave Correa. Every Monday, he would walk around my production area and count the finished goods. Write them down. This was in the 80s. Write them down. Bring them upstairs. Give them to finance. They obviously had the labor file. Each gyro had a credit, so many hours of credit. There was a standard cost system, right? So each one got so many hours of credit. They plugged that in. They took my labor. Here's your efficiency. Dave. So I'm in there Sunday making sure I got all my stuff squared away, and Dave missed the shelf. Or he didn't see this one over here. So I started buying Dave a coffee on Mondays. Hey, Dave, let's go have a coffee every Monday after you're done with the count. So I'd look at his sheet, and I would, of course, I wasn't manipulating the data, but I would look at his sheet, and I would say, oh, I noticed that you missed 100 so-and-so. Did you see them over there? No, I didn't see them. Come on, I'll show you. They're right here, all stamped off by quality. Oh, let me put that in there. And all my numbers went to where they were supposed to be, right? And so what we want to make sure is that folks, and I'm going to pick on Dax if it's okay, folks like Dax, he knows what he thinks he should have spent yesterday or the day before. I mean, he's a CPA. This is his thing, right? And he's like, what the heck, at the end of the month. So now, every day, we give them that file with other folks so that they can look and go, oh, I understand, right, what happened. And it's important because with that data and with just the excellent work that you do, Dax, he's driven revenue up through volume. But the cool thing about what Dax's team, and he's in Peri-Op, so it's the big thing, right? It's a big, I forget how many departments you're responsible for, but like 8 billion, right? It's a decent amount. And, but he's driven his cost down because he's got true costs now, not what happened costs. And now he's identifying things, and it started with conversations. How come this is going against blood products? The GL should be against something else. And then Angela would get involved, and we'd work with finance, and we'd correct the item that was on the wrong kind of stuff. And all that kind of transparency and integration allows us to keep our systems and our teams kind of working together, and it's bearing some fruit. And every now and then somebody might do something that they receive too many or whatever, and it's got to be reversed. But all that data is happening inside the time frame before Ross, who's our accounts payable and the controller, Mike Knoll, before they close the books. So it's kind of reduced that a lot. So transparency is key in that space. We also have monthly meetings with operations and FP&A to talk about the month. So once we know we have relatively good data, to identify themes and drive strategies and initiatives to enhance charge capture, to enhance GL alignment. We look at some of the metrics, and I think I have them here. Yeah, I'm going to talk about them in a minute. But also looking at supply to revenue analysis, volume trends, et cetera. I have here Dax. Dax is the poster child for this. So he really is good at it, and he's taught and mentored others that are becoming good at it in operations. But it's important for us to look at the themes. We had a conversation where we would talk to somebody about maybe using, they were buying a lot in expense. So we're like, well, maybe you should use an inventory model for that. We should probably put that through inventory instead of, the minimum buy and all that stuff. So all those conversations are happening so that we can get more predictable, more transparent data. And it comes from our desire to be very transparent. We try to tie everything back to the P&L or the balance sheet. When it comes to that, we try to tie supplies, backlog and such back to the patient. We tie the financial stewardship back to the P&L and the balance sheet. So when I'm looking at the board meeting, I go to the finance subcommittee board meeting every month. I'm looking at the data. I'm making sure that our team, we analyze it and look at opportunities to either reduce costs in other ways while maintaining, obviously, that patient-centric. Another thing with our transparency is let the data tell the story. Just let it talk to you. It takes the emotion out of it. Let the data tell the story. Whatever the data is, that's the story. When I was doing Black Belt Six Sigma stuff, we had a thing that's probably not PC today, but we would say, if you torture the data, it'll tell you the truth. You just have to look at it. You have to kind of turn it around and do analysis and do some comparisons. But it takes the emotion out from the real message. Again, Angela's team, it does all the data analytics to profile our spend. We have KPIs that we publish. It's monthly with leadership. But we have KPIs such as the percent of supply cost to net patient service revenue. That's a good KPI for us. We have a KPI whenever we see, we periodically look at year over year. So when we look at the supply data, when Angela and I and her team are looking at it, we're looking at year over year inflation. We want to know, is the supply cost going up because of volume, because of inflation? We have a goal. We take 3% of our supplies as the goal for our value analysis work, which Karen Lesbrance, who won the award yesterday, does an amazing job working with the clinical folks to offset the cost of inflation. So we don't allow operations to bake in any inflation in their budget for FY25. So the way that we budget is we budget for flat costs because we're going to offset that inflation through a collaborative effort across all the functions, right? So we don't allow them to put inflation in. We assume that we're going to take it out. And last year, I think it was $8 million, right? So last year we saved about $8 million on about $150 million in spend. We don't, right? So it was a good year. I think it was $260 million in spend total. We had 300, I think, on the slide that you talked about. I think it was 260 in total, and we saved, so it's about 3%, give or take, right? So let the data tell the story. Use KPIs. We do spend to budget, as I mentioned. We do spend to revenue. We look at supply costs. That's my high-level KPI. Is I'm always squinting at the board meeting, trying to, because I think I see the right number up there about supply costs, net patient service revenue. We're baking in, volumes and such as well. One of the things that we do also is we consolidate our spend across the verticals. So like I said earlier, we're a horizontal organization. We're actually in the process of doing it right now, is we consolidate our spend across the verticals. So if we look at what folks are doing and we bring that all up to a common supplier, we want to consolidate all that spend and have that conversation and bring in the subject matter experts, to make sure they get the features and functions that they want. But we're consolidating all that spend to increase our voice. And I know I sent the file to Dwayne the other day, and it was mentioned earlier that now we take that up a level. We're going to consolidate our voice and aggregate that data at Yankee, and then Yankee can then take that and aggregate that data with Premier. And so then now we become advisors. So for instance, hey, I hear that Jack, before he retires, wants to make this big buy of something, and we were going to buy it next year. Sorry, Jack. Love you, man. This time, though, this June, you're going to be retired. But good for you. When I look at that, we say, well, why don't we pull that spend in to this year, so we can tee up with what's going on at Berkshire, and we can get a bigger opportunity, right? Or we might hear from some of our advisors that it's a good time to buy. There's a special here and this kind of stuff. So we want to try to aggregate across the horizontals to both have the conversation with the supplier as well as leverage any benefits that our team could get through working with Yankee and Premier. And so that's value we bring to the clinical folks. They just have to say that they'd like to buy this, and we can go off and help them with that. But it does increase our voice, and it makes us stronger in the marketplace. Okay. Any questions about any of that stuff? I think I might just do a good any question time. Are we still awoke? Okay. Okay, here's the team. So, look at that, huh? It works. So this is Angela McDonald, who's here today. She's the supply chain analytics and strategy. When you think about the way I've laid out the organization, throughout my years, decades, I guess, of career, it's always been plan, buy, make, deliver, is how we would look at the organization, right? And so Angela drives the analytics, which drives the strategy of the supply chain. So data integrity, revenue capture, and then just turning the data into knowledge. And then you've got Dave Texera, who runs supply chain operations, right? So it's kind of receipt or purchase to pay and delivery, right? So his team is the team that's going to be working with the Power BI to prioritize the backlog. They're at the safety huddles every morning on the front lines with the staff, excuse me, sharing supplies across floors. The nurses are great at it. but we don't want them to do it. We'd like to do it for them. So one of the things that Dave's team does right away is they'll get it from another system or another floor before they just go chase the distribution. So when you think about it, and this may be the case in your system or not, but at South Coast, each PAR location is an island. It's all by itself. Somebody scans, goes to distribution, it's calling for material. It's not considering the rest of the system, the expiration dates, right? And so it's an island. Until they can't get it from the supplier, then it becomes a problem. This is post-improvement, which then comes up at safety huddle, and then it's the triage to get the supply. So what Dave's team is doing now is they're in the huddle, and when they see the problem, they immediately collaborate with one another, and there's a tool that our DHS group, our IT group, Digital Health Services, DHS IT group, there's a tool that they have so they can search for that and find out that it's usually on the 4th floor. The nurses know, because they go all over the place when they have to at third shift or whatever, but we need to do that for them because they don't really want to do that. So one of the things that his team does is make sure that happens, as well as exercising the supply chain to make the product come in and then taking it to where it was ordered or received. Very important role. Dave and Angela work very closely on the inner workings of our system if things are not happening the way they're supposed to. Angela's the liaison to our Digital Health Services group, so she's the one that's asking them to make improvements within PeopleSoft or Epic or what have you in order to get the proper relationship between demand planning and so on. Demand planning, and you'll see in a minute what's under her. And then Karen Lesperance has been with us since November. It's coming up on a year now, driving all the clinical sourcing. So when our face to operations is Karen. So if somebody asks us to buy anything, create an item or whatever, let's just say Angela creates the item, somebody asks her to create an item, Karen has to bless it because she's our clinical liaison. I'm fortunate to have two clinical folks on my team. Both Dave and Karen are registered nurses, so we have that embedded into what we do, which is fabulous if you can have that. But Karen is our voice out. If we have a challenge, want to substitute, whatever, Karen's going to take that out clinically, and she's also our kind of voice in. Before we do something, somebody tells one of Dave's guys to do something, Karen's got to get involved, and it's the way, and we're putting in some technology to make that a little bit more efficient, but that's important. Paula Prather drives all of our sourcing, contracts, non-clinical, all the terms and conditions that anybody that raised their hand have to deal with come from our chief counsel, works with Paula and myself really close on making sure. We love to leverage the Yankee and Premier terms. They're easier, but when we need to do something local, or we want to make sure that risk of loss doesn't transfer to us until where's the risk of loss transferring it? Are you insuring it? All that kind of nuance in the contract, rebate tracking, things like that. She does, and then and then Nicole Rosa, who's here driving our logistics team. We spend about $2.5 million a year on logistics costs, project management. Trista reports into Nicole, as well as all of our sustainability across the system is within Nicole's world, and driving costs out of logistics by going back and working with Dave and Angela on changing our behavior, our purchasing behavior, such as minimum fees for purchases, minimum freight fees for under certain dollars, really knowing the contract so that we can take full advantage of what we could get from our suppliers. So that's the team. And then I think I went through this, but again, Angela does supply chain analytics, data integrity to help with revenue capture, to help with proper GL alignment, inventory oversights, our physical inventory within a number of spaces. She's kind of oversees so we can get a sense of the pulse of the system, without having to be told. And this leads into the predictive, the demand planning and the predictive analytics that we're going down, that, profiling our real demand, using Epic to see what consumption is against purchase. Just we spend a lot of time, Angela and I and some of her team members on occasion, in my office whiteboarding stuff. How does this connect? How is this going to happen? And she's just extremely knowledgeable about all things. The best way I can explain it is when you watch one of those science fiction and the person that, or whatever, a drama, when the person that goes into the computer, like they hack in, like that. Yeah, that's Angela. She sits down, it's like, they hack in, I'm in, that stuff. Yeah, that's the sheet. It's like, right? So she knows more about supply chain, and she also was with me over at EMC, and so it's just a natural. So the funny thing about EMC, Dell, the difference, right, a contrast, is when I was at EMC Dell, 85% of what we sold we bought. We were one of the largest consumers, if not the largest consumers of electronics in the country. And so supply chain was sophisticated because we bought most of the stuff we were going to sell. You come to healthcare, right? It's only about 15-20% of what you need, you buy. So you're heavy in the staffing and all the important stuff like that. And so we're trying to bring some of those tools into this space. But that's her organization. And then Dave, there's only 2 boxes here, but they're big, right? So materials management and purchasing, it's really he's the Marines of our team, right? Out there helping the clinical people, not only helping them, but being able to advise them clinically, right? He'll just say, oh yeah, no, and they'll tell you some medical, how it's used, the product, which is fascinating. And a lot of experience in EP Cath Lab as well. Been with South Coast for a number of years. But right now he's focusing on developing his team, which they're doing a really good job out there. He's doing a great job of leading the transformation efforts, the sharing, teaching them to fish kind of analogy, and also working on the materials side for receipt and delivery into the care center, which I'm sure you have some folks that do a great job at that as well. And then Karen, as I said, again, as I said, we're horizontal, right? So each group has their own value analysis. But what Karen does is she's across all the value analysis teams to make sure we're driving the same process, the same approach, right? So she connects all those dots, and she's now moved into VNA and the physician group to drive value analysis as well. And then, of course, clinical sourcing, both, she has to approve it. We've just kept it simple, that if Karen says it's okay, it's okay. And if she doesn't, it's not okay. So it's that simple. As I mentioned to Paula, she does contracting, rebate tracking, which a lot of our clinical folks do rebate tracking. They shouldn't have to, right? They should know, it should be a service. Business reviews, and some of the strategic sourcing. Ooh, sure. And then Nicole Rosa, who does logistics, right? So she does logistics. All the courier fleet reports into Nicole. Again, it's like invisible. You put your thing in a little box, your lab drawer, and the results go into my shot. I don't know how it happens. Nicole's team is taking it all over the South Coast region. Graphic arts, the copy center, all the mail, all the things that go in and out, the menus and everything that's printed, right? Most of it comes through Nicole's team, as well as the mail, legal servings and things like that. And then you've got the supply chain sustainability across the whole system, right? So she's looking at supply chain across all the South Coast. That's one of her passions. But also on the far left over there, is signed up to save a couple $100,000 this year in logistics. And so one of the last things I want to leave you with is, we just acquired a system recently, a small system, a small surgery center, and it's a great opportunity. So Bob Kazmera is the director of operations over there. He's here today in the front row here. And him and I were talking, and we met last week. And we said, so this is cool, right? We got this new, and it really was like a doctor-owned center. So it was very low on technology, very light on technology, and very light. They were still writing stuff down to order it and things, right? So Trista's the project manager for this initiative, and we said, wouldn't it be nice if we just kind of eliminate the need or thought for anybody to worry about ordering anything? There's no inventory, no issuing, nothing, no requisitions, nothing. Just use it, right? Just use it. Focus on the patient. Use the stuff. And so we're now we're doing this. We'll call it a pilot for the systems, right? Because it's about the size of one of our departments. So when it works here, then we'll do it in all these other places. And so we're going to eliminate. We're going to take and use a hub and spoke model. We're taking all the products that they do. Karen's in there first, right? You can switch to this. We buy that. You do this. And then from there, it's going to go to a few PARs that are not going to go to distribution. They're going to go to inventory. So then when your PAR is going to draw from inventory, then inventory, wherever it happens to be. So it might draw from St. Luke's, it might draw from Charlton, it might draw from Toby, or whoever's the majority user is going to draw. That'll auto-replenish. And so they won't have to do anything. Just use it. And Dave's team's going to go over there, scan it, or do its thing, and they don't have to chase a rec or put a rec in or any of that stuff. So we have an opportunity to do what we would like to have done, at South Coast from the beginning, if we will, and then we can replicate that. So one of the things that, from our perspective, is when you go direct from the PAR to the supplier, you miss the opportunity to share. So you increase your spend because you're not subgrouping your demand. So when you subgroup, and this is my old statistic hat, right? When you subgroup variation, you get less variation. So by using the hub and spoke model and drawing off these few areas, what we're able to do is that sharing that David has already started manually. So they may think they want to buy something, but we have it in one of our facilities and it might expire in 3 months. So instead of having each island source itself, it's just going to all source from one location, and that leads us down to subgrouping our demand variability. So when whatever floor is out, the other floor has it, and it's bigger than a bread box when you look at the hospital, the big hospital. But we're going to prove it here, and then that'll be our next evolution. It was a little bit of a I don't believe it kind of conversation, right? Last week, like, no, you just don't worry about it. You just tell us what you're buying, and we're going to take care of everything for you. It's just going to show up. And so that's our next kind of teaser for our sequel. And I think that's a wrap. 4:29. Any questions? Actually, I guess I could talk for an hour and a half. Or is that early? It was supposed to be 4:45. I'm not going to keep going for sure, but I think you were supposed to get out of here at 4:45. Yeah, so we have time for questions, obviously. If anybody has any thoughts, comments, critique, I can handle it. Yes?
How have you been able to, if you have been able to, get a variation in terms of utilization for folks who do procedures? So your surgeons, your folks, IR, cath lab, et cetera. I don't know if you...
Clinical variation.
Clinical variation.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things. That's a great question. So the question was, how are we addressing clinical variation? And most of this presentation didn't deal with the clinical use of the product, right? It's one of those conversations that we believe, and we were talking about it with the Blue Point folks, so I'm not making this up. This morning we were talking about leveraging Blue Point, right? This morning, about leveraging Blue Point to look at best practices around clinical processes, and then put that data, like I was saying about, let the data tell the story, put that data on the table and just say that, looking amongst our peers, there are folks that use less mesh for this procedure or a different type of mesh, and then because we know that our clinical folks are doctors, right? They're curious scientists. They're data-driven. So if you put the data and you get them to talk about it, good things will happen. So that's our plan, maybe for the sequel. But that's our plan, is to leverage Blue Point with best practice sharing to then have the discussion about why do you use so much of this and someone else doesn't. And they'll, initially I imagine they'll have their story, obviously, but then maybe with peer group review, which they're very comfortable and used to, that it'll start to drive that. But we tend to focus on, like for instance, I'll give you an example of the whole, kind of where my head is on this is, so when we had the Baxter shortage, and sorry Baxter, I know you guys have taken, if you're here, I know it's been a tough conference for you, but you're doing great. When we got the notes from Baxter about how to conserve, they came to me, supply chain. I'm not forwarding it on to my chief nursing officer to advise her how to use IV fluids. My job is to go get IV fluids, right? And so what we want to do is bring the data to them to show them where it is and how they're using it and things like that, but we're not going to advise them. So in the case of surgeons or in doctor space, we want the data to tell the story, and we'll just put it up there and we'll start by questioning it. It'll be a process, but we're going to leverage Blue Point is our plan to use the best practice sharing that they have to get in front of the clinical folks as curious scientists and show them the data. That's our plan. That's a great question because it's a tough one, yeah?
We're in the same place, just trying to really, what we know about the providers within our system. That's a small end. We really want to understand, outside of the system how we work.
Yeah, that's a tougher conversation because the surgeon obviously is the top of the pyramid thinking about the patient. They're actually the person interfacing with the patient. And so you have to really drive the data-driven conversation. Outcome-based conversation is a good one, obviously, because that's and they are scientists by nature, so they will, I have seen, right, as I'm sure you all have, they will follow the data. They'll ask more questions, but that's how we plan to do it. Is just let that data drive the conversation, because first thing we did, we were talking about it when I first started at South Coast, we had 2 sets of books. Yankee had a set of books and South Coast had a set of books, so what the savings was. One of the first things I did was just reconcile the books. I'm like, we can't have 2 sets of books, because people were saying, oh, we really didn't save that much. Oh, we did. No, well, we got to have 1 set of books. So when we get 1 set of data, it helps then get that out of the way so we all believe in the data, and then it'll lead you. You can't hide from it. You first got to start debating it and come up with the equation, and then they'll come along, right? Like when we were doing conversions, one of the things we stayed away from was surgeon gloves. Like, nope, not touching that. I mean, that's as close to the patient as you can get, right? So, great question. Anyone else? Yes, Jillian.
Sure. Phil, as we see healthcare moving more towards a clinically integrated supply chain model, we discussed that at ARM, how did you get buy-in from C-suite to develop your team, grow that team?
That's a great question. So, 2019, I put together a set of slides. I think something happened in 2020. Was it a pandemic, something? So we had a set of slides together about how to organize and structure supply chain, because when I got there, it was different. I started in 2017. We had the Puerto Rico thing, and then started to have some traction. And then we had a consultant come in, right, last year, or year before, 2 years ago, thank you, Ange, 2 years ago, to look at cost savings opportunities as well as the structure. And they came away with a recommendation, right, to build the organization that I just showed you. That was in 2022, 3, right, kind of bridging, right? To which Angela and I dusted off our 2019 slides and said, oh, wait a minute. So it was nice because it was a validation of what we had proposed by an outside consultant. And so then last year, about a year and a few months ago, we were funded to do this organization. And we've turned in, I think I mentioned it, I may have mentioned it. And so as a result, with what we're doing and the collaboration we're doing, we turned in about an $8 million return, working with everybody, organizing all that. The Ascend was a nice $3 million return, and then we followed it with some other value analysis things, some utilization things, and so it was. But yeah, the C-suite got buy-in because the consultant validated the recommendations, And to his credit, our previous CFO, Wade Brofman, when he presented it to Dr. Kruger at the time, he said, Phil's been telling us this for years. And so, we need to invest in this because there's good return there. And as supply chain becomes more and more apparent, how fragile it can be and how important it is, because we've had these, especially now, we've got to prepare for the pandemics. We've got to prepare for the hurricanes and the blizzards, right? And we're starting to, really come to realize, and it was discussed with others, that, when it really hits, when it really is tough, we're kind of on our own as hospital systems. And so we need to think about that now, so that, because I remember when I asked for the investment for the strategic reserve, and my boss, the CFO, said that's a great use of the balance sheet. Why don't you go ahead and do that? Because it's like, it's supporting our mission. So that, again, the data, we needed the validation, I needed the validation, mainly because, guys from tech, so that was kind of put us over the top.
Thank you, Phil.
All right, thanks.